What's up, everyone? My name is Jonathan. I'm the host here at the Venue RX podcast, and I am so excited to have Sara Dunn on the show today. Sara is an SEO expert, and I feel like SEO is one of those topics that we all need to know more about. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. Uno, dos, tres. Hey, Sara, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be on with you.
Well, I cannot wait to start unpacking your story. We have an amazing show for everyone today. I think SEO is kind of one of those topics that people can kind of be a little scared of. They can kind of
Totally
be
agree.
a little nervous. Like, what do when you think of SEO, the first thing that pops into my mind is Google AdWords, right?
Yeah.
And this one time that I spent like $1,000 without even knowing it, and I looked at my credit card statement, and it was like, you've reached your limit. And I'm like, what did I?
Oh.
How did I? And then instantly it was like AdWords, but AdWords and SEO obviously are very different. And so you're going to help us understand that. How did you get into the world of SEO?
Well, this is interesting because I think a lot of people who provide services to wedding industry businesses are people who have been in the wedding industry and they figured out something for their own business and now they are applying that to others. Well, I kind of came to this in a different way. So I was a digital marketing agency owner for about 6 years. So I had a small team of people. We did web design, we did graphic design, branding, online ads, like everything for everyone. So we were working with businesses more like concrete companies and dentists and lawyers and those kinds of businesses. And in that effort of doing everything for everyone, I started realizing there were certain bits of things that I really enjoyed doing more than others. And when we made a website for a client, a lot of times they would say, "Hey, I'm assuming this new website is going to help me show up higher on Google." And I was like, I should probably understand how to do that. So that was about 7 years ago that I started learning SEO and started applying it for client sites in other industries and getting them great results. And I just happened to be in 2017 at a women's business conference where I ran into a woman named Allie. And she is amazing. She changed everything for me because she is a wedding planner. She's in Chicago. And we started talking. She said, "Oh, you know websites, you know SEO. Do I have a problem for you?" And I was like, "Oh boy, okay, bring it on." Like, I'm always ready for that. So we sat down together at this conference at a table in the corner, and she was like, "I just had this very expensive website developed, and I used to rank on the first page of Google for Chicago wedding planner. And in the last few weeks, I have totally dropped off to like page 7 or 8. And I am losing inquiries. I'm not getting as much business as I was getting before. And I'm really worried about it." And I said, "This sounds like a fun challenge." So Allie and I worked together for a few months, and it was pretty obvious to me that her web designer didn't know anything about SEO. And I think did her a really big disservice, actually, taking a lot of money and then negatively impacting her business. And
Mm,
as we worked together and eventually got her back to the first page, she said, "This is a big problem in my industry. There are a lot of web designers who can make a beautiful website, but I guess don't really know anything technically about how websites work or how Google works." And so she started referring me to everyone. And it was just a few months. I said, "You know what? I can see a need for SEO specific to the wedding industry." And I created the entire separate brand and website. And I've been full time just doing SEO for the wedding industry for the last 2 years. So
wow.
I'm not someone that's been in the industry myself, but I think that that can sometimes bring a really interesting outsider perspective because I'm able to see what worked in so many other industries and then bring that into the wedding world as something new.
I love that. It sounds like the businesses that you were servicing before were mainly service-based businesses. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
So you
Local
had
service-based businesses. So for SEO, that's very much the same type of work.
absolutely, you had such a great foundation. And I think that's right, actually, maybe coming from like an outsider's perspective almost, bringing fresh eyes to the industry, you're probably going to pick up on things and see things, even from a business development standpoint, that other people may not see, being so entrenched in this is how we do things in the industry. You're going to kind of come at it like, why not apply something that lawyers use successfully? Why not? I love that, and that,
Absolutely.
I think, is what pushes our industry forward, you know, bringing kind of these separate. So that's amazing. Um,
Yeah.
so would you say then that web designers are actually a crucial piece in SEO? Because I think of web design and SEO as two separate things.
Oh, no, I definitely see them as very intertwined. And it's actually unfortunate how often I enter situations still, just like Allie had with her website. So, someone who had an older website that actually ranked pretty well on Google, and they decided to invest in a new website with someone who didn't know SEO best practices, who unfortunately removed all that good work that was done and negatively impact rankings and traffic. And it happens all the time, and there are some few basics that web designers really should know, and anyone should know as they're thinking creating a new website for themselves, just making sure especially not to let old links be broken. So many web design redesigns, we change the about page location from /about to /about dash us. Well, that breaks all your old links. So even simple things like that need to be done with great care if a business is ranking well on Google and is getting a significant amount of leads and traffic from Google. That needs to be done really carefully.
Okay. I want to dive deeper into this, and I'd kind of like to take it two different directions. So I want to ask about some practical things, some of those things that, the web developers need to know, but and whatever you're willing to share. But it sounds like there's two different types of scenarios. Someone who, or maybe even three, one person who's never had a website before and is starting from scratch, probably the best scenario, right?
Often,
Maybe.
well, sometimes, yeah, we could
Okay.
talk about SEO for new websites.
Okay,
It's
cool. So we're gonna have to get into that too.
yeah.
We're gonna have to have you back on. Obviously, I can tell already.
There's so
45
many
minutes,
things.
not gonna do it. But so basically, if you have someone who has an old website that is performing well, you would not recommend they just go and scratch everything because they want some new shiny thing. They need
Exactly.
almost like an SEO audit, would you say?
Yes. So I actually have a service that is specialized for making sure that website migrations are done well.
Okay.
So, for anyone who is interested in redesigning their website and they're a little bit concerned on how that might impact their traffic, I actually can do kind of take a look at what's going on in your analytics. And let me just tell you real quickly what I would do. So, if anyone's listening, they can do that for themselves if they know their way around their analytics platform. So, what I would want to do before a site was transitioned is actually go see where your traffic is coming from right now. So you can go into analytics, into the acquisition section, and then the sources section, and see if you're getting decent traffic from Google. You might already know if you've invested in SEO in the past and you know it's driving you inquiries, that might be something you know already. So I want to know, are you getting decent Google traffic? And what pages on your site are people landing on the most? Because those are the most important pages that you need to make sure the URL either doesn't change with your new website, or you need to make sure that that's redirected. So a lot of times people don't even realize they're getting a lot of traffic from Pinterest or from Google to an old blog post. They didn't even realize that. And
Mhm.
so what their web designer might be saying, oh, we don't even need to copy over all of your old blog content. And I'm always like, yes, you do. If it's actually bringing people to your website, don't just scrape it. You need to have that information. So make that list of your most visited pages on your website, by going into your website analytics and looking for your site visits and your page visit information. So those
So
are big things that are really important that a lot of people don't realize.
So when I'm hearing you, I'm thinking, what about the newbie out there who's maybe says, "Oh, I'm using Wix or Weebly or one of these, more drag and drop user-friendly templates instead of something that's either custom built or like a WordPress site, for example, that sometimes requires a little bit more
Yeah.
handholding." Can you still do that with the same effect, or are those drag and drop builder is kind of a completely different animal.
No, I mean, every website still has URLs and still gets traffic. So no matter what platform you're on, you're still able to go look at that information and kind of make some decisions as you're thinking about transitioning a site to a new platform. All of these drag and drop builders also have SEO settings. So if you are someone that has made your own website on Wix or Weebly or Squarespace, I encourage you to just read a basic SEO settings article, Google Wix SEO setup, and they'll walk you through some basic things about where you need to put some keywords on your site, where you need to maybe customize a title for a page. It doesn't have to be hard or scary. A lot of these platforms have some kind of walkthrough wizards. And I think that's a great place to start for anyone who has built their own site on a drag and drop builder.
Do you have some best practices for someone who's doing this? Let's say that, I just launched my photography business, or, I know especially wedding venues, I think really get a lot of traffic from Google. So when you think about kind of some best practices, some things to do right away, non-negotiables, maybe, what would you say when you're doing any website on any platform? What would you say are kind of some of the first things that you do to start getting some ranking?
Okay, so I think that this can be very simple. Doesn't have to require any tools, just your brain to think about. I think a lot of times people overcomplicate SEO because they hear really complicated terms like meta descriptions and schema, and all of those things can be part of advanced SEO, but I think they also scare people away from doing the basics. So here's what I want someone, a wedding venue owner, or someone who's working on their own website. I want you to think about that one keyword phrase that describes where you are located and your primary service or what your business category is. So if it's me, I'm in Winter Park, Florida right now. So it might be Winter Park Wedding Venue or Wedding Venue in Winter Park, Florida. For a photographer, maybe it's Knoxville Wedding Photographer. For a planner, maybe it's Kentucky Wedding Planner. So a city or state that you want to associate yourself with, preferably where you're actually located, plus that phrase that describes your business. And that I want you to think as the primary keyword for your homepage. Now, a lot of people come to me, they know this. They're like, okay, I keep Googling for Knoxville wedding photographer and I can't find myself. Then I look at their homepage and I realize they've never used that phrase on the page. And Google cannot guess what you are or what you do or where you are if you don't tell them by putting that phrase on the page of your site. So now that you've thought of the keyword you would want to be found for, I want you to use it in a couple places. So I want it actually in the content of the page. So you can say, Big Sky Acres is a Winter Park wedding venue offering all-inclusive packages, blah, blah, blah. So somehow use that phrase within the content of the page. And then if you can figure out on your website platform where the SEO title for your page is set, this is one of the most important settings that tells Google what kind of business you have. So again, if you're on Wix, just Google SEO title on Wix. There will be an article that will tell you where to go and edit that. And in Wix, there's actually a nice little SEO settings tab in your page settings. So you're just going to go there for the home page and you're going to put that phrase in the SEO title. So it would say Big Sky Acres, Winter Park Wedding Venue. And then you have informed Google what your overall category of your website is. And you would be shocked the impact these two little changes can have using your keyword on the page and in your SEO title. I have seen sites jump up 6 pages on Google just because Google didn't know what kind of business it was until you put the phrase you want to be found for where Google looks for it. Does that make sense?
Totally, 100% sense. And I'm now thinking about the websites that I've built because I've totally built like 5 or 6 websites, and I'm
Yeah.
totally guilty of this. I've been like, ugh, SEO, like, I don't know, I'll make a little more money and hire somebody. Like, that's kind of my thing. But it sounds like there are some very simple things that, the average consumer, the average business person can do to kind of help themselves out a little bit. Um, when you think about locations, so I'm thinking, what happens if you have a venue company that has a couple of different venues. Or like for example, my staffing company that I run in Southern California, we operate in Palm Springs, we operate in, San Diego, Orange County. So we're a couple of different places. Am I mentioning all of those on my homepage, or is that going to confuse Google?
So I recommend, if you have multiple locations you can service, that you actually create separate pages on your website for each location that's a little bit customized for that location. So not just the same information, but with a different city listed at the top. But if you've got staff in Palm Springs, you can actually create a page that focuses on whatever keyword that would be, whether it's event staffing in Palm Springs, California. So you create a page that's about that location and then detail the services you offer there. So include some photos from Palm Springs events, talk about the different services you offer, why someone in Palm Springs specifically would want to hire your company. That is the best option when you serve multiple locations, is to actually have separate pages on your site that detail those. Same with venues with multiple locations. I would want each of the venues to have their own page on the site that is optimized for the city where that venue is located.
Got it.
And this gets a little bit more advanced, but you can even do this as a photographer if you're physically located in one place, but really enjoy servicing customers in maybe a different city or several different cities. You can create pages on your site that are specific to each of the cities that you like working in. Just show off photos from weddings in that city, make a list of your favorite venues in that city, provide some specific information. And that's the best way to rank for multiple locations.
Got it. So let's say I'm a wedding photographer, I'm located here in Southern California, but I want to shoot weddings in Arizona, Utah, and Colorado, and Nevada. I'm super ambitious, right? And so then I would create pages. I would go maybe shoot a wedding in each one of those locations and then create a page with a drop down,
Mhm.
and then do the steps you just said. Okay, wow.
Yeah.
That's really, really cool and very practical. You mentioned backlinks. Could For the newbies here, what is a backlink? How does it work? Why is it important?
All right, so backlinks are one of those SEO terms that people start going, oh, this is something new. I've never heard of this before. I can't do it. I want you to think of a backlink as just a vote for your website that's given to you by another website. So a backlink is a link from someone else's website to yours. And the reason why this is important is because years and years ago, when Google was like, how do we look at different sites and decide which one is the best? They said, well, if a lot of people are willing to link to Jonathan's website, then Jonathan must be pretty good at what he does. And if nobody links to Sarah's website, then she must not be as much of an authority as a business and on the internet. And so backlinks are now used very heavily in Google's decision making when deciding which website is going to show up really high in the search results and which website might not.
Hmm.
So part of our work in trying to show up higher on Google is getting more links back to your website. And unfortunately, there aren't a lot of shortcuts to this. If there were, everyone would game the system and find ways to show up higher on Google. And that's one of the reasons Google loves using backlinks as a way to develop authority, because it's hard to get a link from another website. I'm not going to pretend it's easy. You have to actually go and create a relationship in some way. Maybe you do a styled shoot with a bunch of other vendors and you all agree that you're going to blog it on your website and link back to all of the other participants in that blog post. That's a great way to develop a bunch of real backlinks from other local vendors who truly trust you and have worked with you. Let's think about some other ways. A lot of times venues can get really good backlinks when photographers blog a wedding that was shot at their location. One of the things I do for my venue clients is I actually search for their name on Google and go through the results that show up. And there's almost always some photographers who have blogged a wedding and not linked back to the website for the venue. So the venue owner is able to reach out and say, we loved having you here to photograph this wedding. Thank you so much for blogging about it. We would love to share your images on social media. Would you mind linking back to us in your blog post about our venue? And that can be quick way to get a few more backlinks because people may just have forgotten.
I was going to ask you about that. Does social media count as a backlink, or does it have to be from another site?
It does need to be from another website, and it needs to go to your website too. So I had someone in a clubhouse room this week was asking, well, everyone in the style shoot just linked back to my Instagram account. And I was like, ooh, can you go ask them to link to your website instead? Because all you're doing when someone links to your Instagram is helping your Instagram account rank higher. And that's not something that you necessarily have a lot of control over. So it's much better when someone links back to your website. So when I mentioned social media in the last example, it was kind of like a reciprocal thing. Hey, we'll share about you if you'll link back to us.
Hmm.
However, you want to position that with a photographer who has shot at your venue is totally up to you.
So those broken backlinks that you're talking about are when someone links back to a page. Let me see if I can get this straight on my end. They link to a page like like a Colorado weddings or whatever, and
Yeah.
then you go ahead and you create a beautiful new shiny website. You pay $10,000. Some web developer comes in and does a bang up job, but then that link is now not Colorado weddings anymore. It's book Colorado weddings
or
or
or the page doesn't even exist
oh.
because the web designer didn't replace it or recreate it. They have their own strategy and they're like, "Oh, we don't do that. We're just going to make a services page and about page for you." And your Colorado weddings page is gone now. Um,
Ooh. Do you see that happen
so
quite a bit?
all the time,
Oh my
all the
goodness.
time. And people just don't know. And I have all these ideas about how can I do maybe some education and some workshops for web designers because that does create a lot of problems. So when I see broken backlinks from other websites, but even more, I see broken links from Pinterest. So people have pinned your images maybe on an old blog post and you've changed that post and the URL. And so now when someone clicks a photo on Pinterest, they just end up at an error page on your website.
Mm.
And the other thing when you change a URL is that Google now views that page as a new page if you don't redirect it. So your Colorado weddings page was on the first page of Google for Colorado weddings, then it's just gone. And Google scrapes you from the search results and may eventually rank a different page of content on your site, but you're going to lose all of that visibility until you get ranked again by Google for another page.
So what does someone do about this? Like I'm actually going through the same thing myself. So I'll use myself as an example. I've got this staffing. We're changing things up a little bit because we've been doing venue management for some time now. And now we want to really be more public about it and take on new
Ooh,
clients. So we have several venues that we manage, but we want to have a page and I want to kind of do a rebrand.
yeah.
So instead of going through and changing everything, how would you recommend that I go about kind of adding some stuff, taking away some stuff, but without hurting myself?
So you just need to know all of the URLs on your site that are driving traffic right now.
Okay.
So hopefully you have Google Analytics installed. If you don't, now's a great time. So it starts accumulating some data for you that you can look at. And then I want you to go into analytics and then site content and all pages, or site content and then landing pages, especially. And that's going to tell you what pages people are landing on when they first visit your website. And those top 10, 20 pages, I just want to make sure they're not broken when you rebrand and change your site. So the best thing you can do is either recreate the content at the same URL or redirect the old URL to the new one.
How
So,
often how often do you see people who are like Google Analytics? How do I do? Is that pretty common, or
oh
do
yeah.
most people come to you and they kind of have a good understanding of how this works?
No, and I don't require anyone to. I know that analytics is kind of its own thing. You're trying to run your business. That is one of the reasons that so many of these website platforms now are actually including their own analytics. So I'm pretty sure Wix and Squarespace actually have an analytics section, and it's not done through Google Analytics, it's their own tracking because they know that a lot of people don't take the time to install a Google Analytics tracking code. So I do want to explain to anyone who's not familiar that Google Analytics is just a free product from Google that tracks your website visitors. And it knows things like how long someone spends on your site, how many people are coming to your site, where they're coming from. You can even see cool things like, okay, all of these visitors, here's where they're coming from. And then here's which platforms actually bring you the most engagement. So you'll be able to say, okay, people that come from Google tend to spend 3 minutes on my website, whereas people who come from Pinterest only spend 35 seconds. So as you get a little deeper in your marketing and you want to use data to make decisions about maybe where your time is spent, Google Analytics is a great tool to use because you can actually see what marketing methods are driving you the best traffic. And I'm so glad you asked about this because this is one of the things that I nerd out about as someone that's outside of the wedding industry that a lot of wedding pros haven't really thought of. And so I see Pinterest experts just talking about how much traffic they're driving. And I'm like, wait, is this good traffic? Are these people that will actually book with you or inquire with you? The data will tell us which content is getting traffic to it, and we can make some decisions about, is Pinterest actually driving business or not.
Mm. So there's a difference then between good traffic and bad traffic, I'm hearing.
There's good traffic and there's useless traffic. So
Okay.
here's a really good example. So I work with a venue group on the East Coast, and they've done a really good job over the years having a marketing department that's devoted to blogging. They're like, we're going to blog once a month. So they have hundreds of blog posts. And so they brought me in and they said, take a look at this. I think we're doing pretty well. I said, okay. So I got in there, got real geeky with the data, and I recognized that yes, they were bringing in a lot of traffic, but a lot of the cases, it wasn't anyone who was ever going to book their venue in the Boston area. And here's the reason why. They were writing blog posts on topics like when to send your wedding invitations. So they were getting all of this traffic from Google, from people that were searching for things like when to send my wedding invitations, when to send my save the dates, etc. But I want your venue owners to think about what the problem with that might be. It's that people that are thinking about sending their wedding invitations probably have chosen a venue already. And
Mm.
so here you are bringing in all of these people who, yeah, they're going to get married, but they've already chosen a venue. They're never going to book with you. And also you're bringing in traffic from all over the country. So not just people in the Boston area. So when we have a location-based business, I really recommend that vendors spend their content creation time becoming a local expert in their area. So instead of this strategy where they were blogging about when to send your wedding invitations, I said, why don't you blog about fall weddings in New England? Give your best tips, show off your venues in the fall. Talk about things people might not recognize about fall weddings in New England. Maybe it's really cold by November and you need to have a backup plan. I don't want you just to blog really general stuff. I want you to be seen as an expert in your particular area of the country. And that's going to bring you more local people. And if it's something more like helping people decide what time of year to get married, they may not have chosen a venue yet. So there's good traffic and then there's useless traffic.
That's so powerful. That's so much gold right there. Like, if the whole podcast was just that, I feel like that was pound for pound the best advice I've ever heard about this, because you're totally right. There's a lot of, I know I've done it in my business, like useless effort. You go, it's like, oh, it's Father's Day, it's Valentine's Day, it's whatever. And you create this themed blog article or even a video or whatever. And you're spending time, resources, effort, energy, you're directing your team towards getting this done. And you're totally right. It's wedding invitations is kind of, you're 2 months out,
Yeah, you're
you
too
know,
far into the
2 months out.
planning process.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
really important thing to think about. What are people wondering about before they make a decision to hire someone of your vendor category? So my full service wedding planner clients, they have to get to people when they're still deciding, like, am I going to have a destination wedding in Boston or not? Do I want an outdoor wedding or not? So they have to be so early in that decision process. It doesn't make any sense for a full service wedding planner to create an article about how to put together your seating chart, because it's, again, they're way too far into their wedding planning process. And that's also not something that someone that's interested in a full service planner would ever Google for. So
Wow.
think
Wow.
about who's going to hire you and what challenges they have before they make that decision.
Are there some tools, or maybe, because it sounds like the best idea would be to put together a plan. And I know for maybe the more sophisticated business owners who are listening to this are like, of course I have a marketing plan and all of that, but maybe to first have a plan, but B, if you do have a plan, analyze the plan against a very intentional strategy to target people when they're at the place in the buying cycle where your vendor category fits in. That
Yeah.
makes total sense. I love that.
Yeah.
What other tools do you see online that are really helpful? Because you've mentioned Google Analytics. Are there some other tools that you'd recommend?
Yes. Though I don't want anyone to get too intimidated by tools. I know sometimes we try to get into things and there's too much information. And again, then we're just like, I give up on SEO. I don't get it. I actually know an SEO expert who doesn't even really do keyword research. She's just literally like, let's describe your ideal client. Let's make a big list of questions they have before they hire you. And your strategy is blogging the answers to those questions. And then she's like, that's it. I'm like, that's actually a really good approach. If you don't want to do tools, you are intimidated by the data. I really like that idea. If you do like tools a little bit, there's two things that I would recommend that you look at. The first one is another free tool from Google, separate from analytics. It's called Google Search Console. It's very annoying. You have to sign up for this and install it separately. I don't know why they don't come together in a box. But this is a really powerful tool because it's the only thing that will tell you exactly what you're ranking for on Google. So if you're not familiar with keywords, you've never thought about it, I want you to install Google Search Console and then just go into the performance report after a few days of data, and Google will tell you what they're ranking your site for right now. What are you getting actual clicks for from Google right now? And then you can kind of dive a little deeper and say, well, what are some things I'm ranking for but not getting clicks for? And that might inspire you to think of some content ideas. That might make you realize you need to use that phrase on the homepage of your website. Um, Maybe a lot of people are searching for outdoor wedding venue, but you've never used the word outdoor wedding venue anywhere. So, you got to run out there and make sure people know you have an outdoor space. So, Google Search Console is a really good tool to find out what you're ranking for and what you're getting clicks for. The other tool I wanted to bring up is a tool that's free with limited use. It's called Uber Suggest.
Okay.
So again, if you're not familiar with keywords, I love Uber Suggest, just the free version. Just Google Uber Suggest, it'll take you right there. And you can put in a keyword idea and it will give you a whole list of related recommendations. And it will tell you how many times each of those things are searched every single month. So you might find out that outdoor wedding venue, Massachusetts, is searched 300 times a month, but outdoor wedding venue, Boston, is only searched 50 times a month. So you may need to make sure to express that you're an outdoor wedding venue in Massachusetts and not just focus only on Boston when you use the language on your website. So it's really interesting tool. I love Uber Suggest. If anybody would like a deeper dive, I did an SEO lunch and learn all about my favorite SEO tool. So 30 minutes of me walking through why I love it and things you can do with it. So I'd be happy to send that to them.
Amazing. So, Sarah, this could change someone's business almost overnight. Is
I,
that fair to say?
I think overnight might be overstating it.
Okay.
SEO is slow. So Google recognizing changes to your website is slow. Just another reason that a lot of people don't have the patience for it.
What does slow
Um,
mean?
So, depending on how competitive a certain keyword is, you might put it on your website and you're not going to move up to the first page of Google for several months. Or Google might not even recognize you made that change for a few weeks. So, it takes a lot of patience. but it absolutely can pay off. And the reason the patience is worth it is when you have a good SEO strategy and you use your keywords well, you can rank in searches for years into the future. So, when we get you to wedding venues in Massachusetts to the first page through SEO best practices, you can continue to bring in 100, 200 searchers a month every single month from here until someone else outranks you.
Wow.
So it can be years. So I love SEO because it's a long-term strategy as opposed to advertising or Google AdWords, which you only rank as long as you're paying for it.
Makes sense. So it's a little bit of a slower, but it's kind of like a savings account almost. You're putting the content there. It's kind of how I view YouTube, actually. You're
Yeah.
not going to get necessarily huge viral spikes unless you're creating a crazy video of some sort, but you are creating this evergreen content that'll sit there and kind of push the brand forward. Well,
And some
Sarah,
things will take off and you'll feel really good about that effort that you put in a year ago. And a lot of times SEO is the same.
I love that. I love that. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the show. You mentioned the lunch and learns, and I want everyone, I mean, me listening to this just here on the show, I'm going to now dig in even deeper to what you do. And maybe I'm going to end up hiring you because my SEO needs work for sure. But, where can people learn more about you? Where can they contact you? These lunch and learns, talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, thank you so much. So every single month, I do a free 30-minute SEO lunch and learn. It is not a webinar, there's no pitch. I just want to teach some sort of very actionable bit of advice about SEO. So I definitely recommend going to my website, saradoesseo.com/learn. That would be where you would find out about an upcoming lunch and learn. And that's a great place to get started and just learn a little bit, get to ask me questions in the comments, and just hang out with me every single month. So that would be a great place to do it. And I'm always available on Instagram. If anyone has a question, my DMs are open, and that's at Sara Does SEO.
I love it. I love it. You're keeping consistent across the channels. And you're also on Clubhouse, correct?
Yes, yes, I've been dabbling in Clubhouse. It's been very interesting. Have you used it?
Absolutely. I've used it. It's tough for me because I have 4 kids. I have two businesses, 2 podcast shows, like a bunch of different stuff going on. And so because you have to be there, you have to be on. And if you're going to engage at all, you have to raise your hand and then wait to hear your name come up. And so if you miss something, they'll oftentimes skip you or they'll drop you out of the speaker platform. So I've used it when I have time. Driving time, of course, is good, but always good. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was really fun.
Absolutely. I'm so glad we could do it. And I hope that was helpful. I'm always happy to answer any questions if there are follow-up questions.
Amazing. These tactical podcasts where we get to talk about real things that help business owners are some of my favorites. And I think that the more people who know about this, you can get really deep in it, like you said, in the numbers and totally nerd out, or you can hire an expert like yourself, Sarah. But just going along that journey and kind of taking that step forward, adding some of those basic steps, like you said, I think will be a real game changer for a lot of people. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank
All right,
you.
all right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you in the next episode. Make sure to go follow Sarah and subscribe to this channel if you like the content we're putting out. Thanks so much.